Hello, everyone. Today, our guest is Andro Vos, the CEO and founder of the Wildlife Forensic Academy, focusing on wildlife crime forensics since 2016. With over 2 decades at the Netherlands Forensic Institute, he established forensic programs in South Africa, Botswana, and Rwanda. An international speaker and TEDx presenter, Andro has managed innovative projects like CSI The Hague, held policy advisory roles in the Dutch Ministry of Security and Justice, and he did forensic science at the University of Leuven. Welcome to Lex Woodley Interviews. Andro, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Lexter.
You are the driving force behind Wildlife Forensic Academy, but rumor has it you started your career as professional football player. Were you like Messi or were you like Ronaldo?
No, I'm Messi or Ronaldo, that's not from this planet. So I had some skills, but not these skills.
How did you go from scoring goals to solving crime?
Well, actually, I got injured when I was 21, actually, and I already played professional soccer at Excelsior Rotterdam. And because of this injury, I couldn't play any more soccer. So my dad was working at the Court of Law in Rotterdam, and he saw some possibilities, and I found a job at the Court of Rotterdam. That's why I ended up in the criminal justice chain,
And what is the pivotal moment for you to really make that significant change to go into, the career that you have been doing?
Well, actually, when I started at the Court of Rotterdam, quite quickly I ended up in a management position and I did internal studies. And the criminal justice case was actually quite interesting to work in, and I started in the Court of Rotterdam, then I went to work to the prosecutor office, to the national prosecutor office, where we did these big cases like the top criminals from the Netherlands and terrorism. Then I went to the Ministry of Justice, to the police, did a lot with the Secret Service, the Ministry of Justice, and then I went to the Netherlands Forensic Institute.
Tell me more about the motivation for you to transition into wildlife.
Well, during my job at the Netherlands Forensic Institute, my boss came up to me one day and he said, Andro, we have to build a network in South Africa because there's lots of criminality and a lack of forensic knowledge. So why don't you go to South Africa and build a network and see what we can do? So I went to South Africa, took one of my colleagues with me. And the first day that I was in South Africa, I had to deliver a lecture to the South African Police Service in Cape Town. And after the lecture, a lady came to me and she said to me, well, Andro, this is really what we need in South Africa. You have to meet the president. And it was quite funny, being just one day in a huge country and have to meet the president. So I didn't believe her, actually. And she walked away with her phone and came back. You have to take tomorrow the plane to Durban. There's the palace of the king, and you have 30 minutes to talk to him. So the next day we went to Durban with my colleague and this lady, fly to Durban, take a cab to the palace. And then the phone of this lady went, and it was Mthuli Suma, the fourth wife of the president, saying he's not in the palace. You have to go to the Hilton presidential suite. So we went to Hilton. We waited hours and hours, and late in the evening we met with Mthuli Suma and another princess from South Africa, and that was actually the start of the way to forensics and wildlife forensics.
So what happened from then on? It was a start?
Yeah, that was a start. And so I met with people who are in marine life crime, because the poaching on the marine type is very, very big. And they invited me to give a lecture at the Stellenbosch University. So I gave this lecture at the Stellenbosch University, and someone asked me, why don't you use your forensic knowledge in the combat against wildlife crime? And this was actually 16 years ago. I never heard of wildlife crime. So I said to this lady, well, I don't know what you're talking about, actually. I don't know nothing about wildlife crime. And then she invited me for a visit and colleges in the Southern African Wildlife College in the Kruger Park. So when I went there I learned about the unbelievable things are happening in the combat against wildlife crime.
What are the unbelievable things that happen?
Only the numbers, if you look at statistics, numbers from the World Bank, the total economic value of wildlife crime is between the $1 and the $2 trillion annually. Wow. And that's unbelievable. And it's unbelievable. And it goes on. And many sectors are involved in wildlife crime. Yeah.
Why is it such a big thing?
The biggest demand of wildlife products is from Asia. And it's traditional medicine. It's 5,000 years old. And people believe strongly in the power of cure yourself with species, with animals, with products from animals. So the rhino horn, you got the pangolin, you got abalones, you got all kinds of animals that are used to cure people. And the chance of being caught is limited and the resources are unbelievable. And that's why the syndicates that we know here in Europe, that we know in the US, the syndicates that we know in Asia are all involved in wildlife crime because of that reason.
Why are the chances of being caught so low?
Well, the thing with wildlife crime is that's a facilitating form of organized crime. You have to imagine that if you kill a rhino in the Kruger Park, within 84 hours, the rhino horn will be on the market in Hanoi. That means that the poachers have bribed the whole chain, police officers, rangers, customs personnel in Africa and in Asia. And the routes are not controlled because in Africa, wildlife crime has not a priority. So drugs traffickers, arms traffickers, all kinds of criminals use these same routes throughout to get their goods around the world. You nearly can imagine that the harbor in Rotterdam, just 5 minutes from here, is the biggest transit harbors from wildlife crime products from this whole world.
But it starts in South Africa.
It starts in Africa.
In Africa, in the whole continent, actually.
In the whole continent, yeah.
But what is so special about South Africa in this case?
Yeah, because South Africa has a wonderful infrastructure. So if you kill an animal, there are wonderful roads to traffic to big airports of harbors. So that's why South Africa is quite interesting for poaching. And the fact that, South Africa is there with the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean, and for biodiversity, it's a very, very rich country. And we see it's not only actually the iconic animals that we know as the rhino and the elephant, but it's marine crime, poaching, abalones, crayfish, you name it. It's all been harvested and poached and trafficked to Asia. And then you have succulents, plants. And nowadays the poaching of plants is getting very huge. So actually the whole country is actually demolished by poaching.
So when you heard about this, you got this information, what was your reaction?
Actually, my reaction was quite arrogant because I said, listen, I have worked years at National Prosecutor Office. I did serious organized crime and terrorism, never heard about wildlife crime, so I didn't believe it. But that same evening, a helicopter was flying around the lodge where I was. And I went out and asked people what was going on. And they said a rhino was killed 1 hour from where we are now. So the next day we went in a helicopter to the carcass. And, I saw this image, it burns in my eyes still. It was a big rhino and the horn was cut off. And 2 guys were with metal detectors looking for the bullet in this enormous animal. And after 10 minutes that I found myself back and I could look as a professional, I realized these animals are killed in a rural area, so you never have a witness statement. And I saw all the forensic traces there, and I recognized them because they were exactly the same as on a human crime scene. But the rangers and the veterinarians, they were walking over the traces, so they demolished them. So how are you going to solve this case? You have no witness statements and no forensic evidence. So that was one split second and my life changed immediately because I said, well, this is what I'm going to do.
So then you had to go back to South Africa.
Yeah, so first I had to go back to the Netherlands Forensic Institute, and I can remember that I was in a meeting of the directors, and I said, well, listen, guys, you asked me to look for new business models for forensics. I think wildlife crime is one of them. Then I had to convince them how big wildlife crime was and how our technology would work there. And it went on, and one of a sudden they said, well, okay, Andro, we'll make you free of work. So you have to look for evidence, for data that our technology works. So that was actually the permission I gave to investigate and examine what was happening. Yeah.
I know that one of the times that you went to South Africa, you had quite an interesting, well, scary experience, actually. Tell us about that.
Yeah, actually, my boss said to me, well, the networking in Africa is going quite well, but possibly it's better that you go and live in South Africa. So, and he said to me, and you have to take your wife, Petra, with you, because I don't want to hear after a year, well, Petra doesn't like it. So I said to her, okay. We went to Johannesburg. We arrived late in the evening. And most of the time, actually always when I go to South Africa, I was not a diplomat, but I spoke to the ministers, so I have to know how the politics are going. So the first thing I always do is go to the ambassador and ask him, how are things going? And because everything in South Africa is politicized. And most of the time he sent his car to collect me at the airport, but this time the guest house would send a driver, but I didn't see the driver. So it was already after 12 in the evening. And I got the feeling, okay, there is no driver. I tried to call the guest house and nobody picked up the phone. So I had to take a cab. So I went back in the airport and asked someone from the security, bring me to a decent, trustworthy driver. So he showed us around and he picked a driver and he brought us to Pretoria. And it was already 2 at night, very, very dark and no traffic on the roads. And one of a sudden was there an accident with another car. And quite quickly I saw that one of the guys had a rifle in his hand. Me and my wife had to go step out of the car, and the guy came up to me and he pointed his gun to my head. And we had to lie on the ground with our face in the sand, and they were taking our luggage and all the belongings we had. Yeah, and that was an experience. But I can tell you, I'm not a victim, So my position is that I did something wrong. I had to organize my transport better, yeah. So I am experience richer. I know what it happens when people gunpoint you because you are in fear and you don't have time to think. The only thing I was thinking, is this real or am I dreaming? Luckily, nothing happened, and yeah. And it was no reason for me to not go back because, fear, No, it's not that impressive. It happened and, yeah.
Not that impressive.
My wife was with me, Petra, and she's a very charming lady and she's afraid for animals and I don't know what, but she recovered very well and she didn't have any problems with to give that we don't feel victims. She said to me, these people, they didn't go after our lives, but they are interested in our luggage. They are poor people. So if you have that motivation and position, I think it's very healing. We had no trauma.
Wow. How did it go from there on to, establish the Wildlife Forensic Academy?
So the Netherlands Forensic Institute is a top science science-based institute, so I have to do an exam and an investigation. How does it work here? So what I came up with is that just 5% of all the poachers that are brought to court get sentenced. 5%. That means you can kill an animal and get away with it. And the reason is no forensic evidence. So they have witness statements, but no objectifiable evidence. That was one. The second thing was there's a low reading and writing. There's a low understanding of reading and writing in Africa, 70% illiteracy. And then there are no facilities to train people. And the question is, how do you going to train science like forensic science? It's nature science, it's biological science. That's the first problem. Then you have the crime scene itself. On the crime scene, you have human traces, non-human traces. You have chemical traces, you have digital traces, you have tool marks. So you have to detect them and collect them, and that's a study on its own. And then you have this long criminal justice chain starting at the crime scene. Then you have first responders, then the police, then the forensics, the prosecution and the court of law, and then the defense, looking at, okay. So that makes it very complicated. And how do you gonna transfer this knowledge to people who can't read and write? So then I got the idea to build a experience laboratory where you can experience things and don't need books. So we built the Wildlife Forensic Academy. It's a 1,000 square meter facility, and we have simulated the whole criminal justice chain. So we have wildlife crime scenes, a rhino, a giraffe and a lion. We have vehicles, we have furnished house, we have a courtroom, we have a laboratory, and we have an observation room. So you have the whole chain there. And all our lecturers, they wear their uniforms. So the police officer that's lecturing wears his uniform, the prosecutor wears a toga, the judge wears a toga, the forensics expert wears his white suit. So if you're illiterate and you come in, you recognize the actors and you immediately start thinking, okay, where is my position within the chain, and how can I add something to prosecution? Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. How long did it take you to develop this?
The idea started 16 years ago. Then I developed it within the government. I was at the European Commission and United Nations. They loved the idea. They sponsored it with €6 million. And then the Netherlands Forensic Institute changed policies. So they said, well, it's a wonderful plan, but we won't do it. And, it was already my baby. And I strongly believed in the concept. And that's the strange things. My colleagues they were quite brilliant guys in their work. And I have developed this idea. And I even made a artist impression, because something that originates in my head, I have to share with other people. And then I learned that most of them didn't saw anything in the concept. They said, no, it won't work. And if I have learned something, that if you create an idea, and this idea will be solely your ideas, and it's a product of all your experience, your educations, your successes, your failures, and then you can create something. And it's not necessary that someone else will understand what you create. The first time when I created this idea, and I built the academy, and quite arrogant to sit in Europe actually, and build something that will be good for Africa, but that's another story. But we built the academy, and the first time someone from the prosecution from Africa, who was very experienced in wildlife, came and he brought a visit. And I gave him a round tour. And after the round tour, actually he was quiet. He didn't say not anything. And after the round tour, he looked at me and he became emotional. And he said, Andro, this is so brilliant. I won't say the curse word, but this is so brilliant. This is what we need. And that was actually the first time I get a real feedback from someone who could know, yeah.
And you said it's another story, but you did mention it, so I'm curious why you said it. That it's someone from Europe actually contributing to the continent of Africa, actually. Why did you say that?
There are many people in Europe who feel with Africa, because wildlife crime is not an African problem. It's a serious, not an African problem. And they want to contribute. But you have cultural problems. You have, people in Africa are not stupid, and they create things that they need. But sometimes arrogant Europeans come with ideas, and they bring money with them. And because of the money, they can do things, but they doesn't work most of the time. And that's why one of the reasons what I did was Greg Simpson. He's a friend of mine, and he's a wildlife veterinarian. He knows the content. He's an African, And I invited him because I want to have ownership, African ownership. I don't want to be the guy from Europe that's doing things there. Yeah.
What kind of people? Where do the people come from the world when it comes to this academy? Where do they apply from?
Yeah, actually, then I have to say first something about our business model, because it's very difficult to earn money in conservation. So I created the idea of the academy, but now I have to make a business out of it. So the idea was to attract students to South Africa and deliver study abroad programs. And what you see in American and actually Western students, they are looking for purpose, especially after COVID. So when I created the idea, I had to test it. Are these students really in for it? So I received an invitation to go for a first lecture in the university, and I thought maybe 10 students would come and listen to my story. And when I entered the college hall, it was crowded. Even on the stairs, students were there.
How many people?
I think 150. And during the lecture, they were WhatsApping other students that were not there. Well, listen, we have here a talk. You have to be there. And the lecturer said to me, listen, you gave a lecture from about 1.5 hours, and after a half an hour, we lose our students. They do all kinds of everything, but they sit and they listen. And we can explain it because they are looking for purpose. We get students here that say, we don't want a study that makes me rich, but I want to contribute something. And this is what we're seeing. So we started first with human forensic students. Then in a 1.5 year time, the universities changed their curriculum, and they put wildlife forensic in it because they heard about these wonderful stories that they have at our academy. But now we got not only forensic students, we got law students, we got business students, we got medical students, because the thing is, wildlife crime is in all domains of our society. For example, you have obviously the serious organized crime, so the law students are very interested to see how that involves. Then you have the medical aspect, AIDS, Ebola, SARS, MERS, COVID are all diseases that origin in wildlife, the consuming of wildlife and the trafficking of wildlife. Then you have the business students. We work with the Nijero, the business university. We had a meeting with the professors, and we said, well, listen, your students will once be on a board of directors, and every strategic decisions will be related to conservation and sustainability. And they said, yes, it's true. So now we get students from Nijero. And the wonderful thing is, last time we had a community week, and the professor was there, Professor Desiree van Gorp. And she was there, and she took her phone after a few days, and she called Nijero and said, well, we have students, we have to go next year to Silicon Valley, but we don't go to Silicon Valley, we go to South Africa. And in October we will receive nearly 60 students from Nijero who will stay a week and to look at all kinds of data that is used in conservation, for example.
How often do you have spots actually for students to come over?
Actually, the whole year, because the South African winter is wet, but it's very nice actually. So what we do, we have 2-week, 3-week, and 4-week courses, and we have internships. So when the students come, it's not that they come for a nice time. They have a nice time. Obviously, South Africa is beautiful. We are in Cape Town, and that's for a reason, because the reserve where we are is 1 hour from Cape Town, and they are surrounded with wildlife the whole study. But they can, in nighttime, in the weekends, they go to Cape Town and they have a wonderful time. So that's the combination. Other thing is that Cape Town has no malaria, so they don't have to use malaria pills. So that's one thing. The other thing is they come with their forensic knowledge, and we, in their internship, we bring them to all kinds of NGOs. You have NGOs that handles problems with baboons, with leopards, with all kinds of animals. But what they don't do, if one of the animals is killed or hurt, they don't do a forensic investigation. So the students start investigations and show them what you can find in forensics and bring it to court. So it's not only bringing fun, but it's a knowledge exchange. And In these, we opened the academy May 2022, and we have now about 25, 30 international universities, even universities from Taiwan. We got students from Taiwan who came for our course, and they were blown away because they thought that the rhino horn, you have to kill a rhino to harvest the horn. But you can paralyze the animal and you can cut the horn, and after 2 years it grows back. So they eat abalone, and they didn't know that abalone is one of the biggest forms of organized crime. So they go back with this information, with this knowledge to the university, and we expect to get much more Taiwanese students, yeah.
What is the possibility, though, because it's good to hear why it is in South Africa, the academy, why Cape Town, but what are the chances of this academy branching out to other cities and even countries and continents?
Mm-hmm. So in these 2.5 years, we received 8 requests to build more academies. The most crazy one was Dubai, because I don't think they have a lot of wildlife, but they have another problem, and that is border security. They imported a lot of wildlife bringing to rich families. And they are a hub for lots of many countries in the EU or in the Arabic world, actually. So they have another problem. So that was a request, but we have requests from Europe, several other countries in Africa, and as well the US, because wildlife poaching is not an African thing. In the Netherlands, there is as well poaching. In the eastern part of Europe, there's a lot of poaching going on, and there's everywhere a lack of forensic knowledge. So we got a lot of requests, but we're not a McDonald's, it's not a franchise. We will build new academies, but we have to make sure that the quality is there, because what we do actually, what you see in conservation, that there are a lot of people that are buying reserves. They have breeding projects, they put fences around reserves, they do very good work. But if the criminal justice chain is not there, the rule of law is not there. For example, if you take the police or the prosecution out of the Netherlands, in 1 year time, the economy will collapse. And that's what's happening in conservation. So we can't be part of the criminal justice chain, for obvious reasons, but we can build knowledge institutes that strengthen the criminal justice chain in Africa. And that's what we see. We see universities sending police officers, sending rangers, sending marine officers. They get forensic knowledge and they bring it in the criminal justice chain, yeah.
So, as you said, many requests, the quality has to be, of a certain level. Are there still, in a few months or years, can you say something about the chances of the places where you might go to, one of the first ones?
Yeah, we're talking with the Kent University in Great Britain. They want to build an academy on their campus. And to give you some more information, we have an invitation from the Staffordshire University, and they will create a podium, and the academy can then give lectures about what we're doing, and they have invited the whole academic community in Great Britain. So that gives us a lot of exposure. And the same will happen in Atlanta. We will be there as well on the podium. There are 61 universities, and they've invited them as well. Because, people start realizing that if you want to combat wildlife crime, you have to do something in the criminal justice chain.
Yeah. So you're getting invitations. That is great. I also heard of an invitation by CNN that happened.
Yeah, actually, that was a nice story, actually, because when we started years ago, I say to the guys, our shareholders, they put money in, but not really for a return on investment. So we have shareholders. And I said, well, guys, when I'm in the Netherlands Forensic Institute, I see guys with white suits solving with state-of-the-art technology crime. And if you see it on television, you see documentaries, you see CSI movies, people love it. We can get everyday cameras in the institute. But when you combine forensics and wildlife, it's explosive. It will be explosive. And I predict that when we start, within 3 years, we will be on CNN. And that was obviously a hard laugh. Oh, Andro, wow, you're selling this stuff very well. said, no, I mean it. So when we opened it, we were blown away by the press. BBC, RTL, NOS, ARD, BRT,
There's
Japan,
Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Indeed,
all the big platforms were there. So, and a few months ago, and they recorded one month ago actually, we got CNN with a camera, and they did a coverage, and they broadcast it on CNN International. Yeah, and actually my shareholder said, Andro, you have to go. I was in the Netherlands at that time, because you are the face from the academy, you have to talk to CNN. I said, no, let Greg go. He knows what he's talking. I have already made my point, yeah.
So that is about the exposure. How about some of your favorite stories when it comes to the rangers that follow the courses?
Yeah, what we've done, because rangers are really undereducated, and there's no money for education for rangers. So we have built a fund, and in the fund are scholarships, so rangers can get a scholarship for training. So it's not the case that if a ranger get a training and he use our knowledge that he phones back, oh, what I've done now, so. But every now and then we get something back. And this was one ranger, he got a training and he went back to the Kruger Park, and there was the poisoning of several wild dogs, and they are highly endangered species. So the South African police was there, and he was there as well as a ranger. And he said to these guys, well, I see forensic traces, we have to collect them. And he started and guided the police to collect the traces. And it went up to the prosecution, and they said, we have a very strong case. And that's because of the forensic evidence is there. So these guys, they will be catched, yeah. So that's a very, very nice result. And I'm sure there are more results, but we can measure our impact just by the case from all the requests we get to build more academies. Yeah.
You also have an annual community event.
Yeah, that's the first thing, one of the first things. Americans say, in politics, it's the economy stupid, but I always say it's the community stupid, because what we've done, we invite international universities, and they come and they stay 5-6 days at the academy, and they are more on professor level, and we create ambassadors because they see what we do, we see what the need for forensics is, we bring them to excursions, and we have a very nice time. So, and they became ambassadors for our academy. We started after COVID, because in 2021 and 2022 we couldn't market the academy. Actually in 2023 we really could start marketing, because the universities were open and we get our first students. And now in 2024, and we see now that 2025 we will be packed. Yeah.
You said earlier on that when you presented it to colleagues, not everyone was on board. Where do you get your motivation from? Before you answer, I know that you are a book reader, you like certain books. I'm curious about which books motivate you.
It started when I was training as a soccer player, and one of my friends was reading books of Chopra and Anthony Robbins and Napoleon Hill. And I said, what are you reading, man? And he said, yeah, you have to read it. I think you will like it. So I started reading these books, and it was very interesting. So how you can reach goals, that people interfere with each other, they have energy, and you share your energy with other people's, and you can actually influence people. You don't notice it, but you can have a very good feeling if you talk to someone, or have a bad feeling. And there was one lady gave an example. She said, well, listen, music is a frequency. It's a frequency. You can't see it, you can't feel it, but it changes your mood.
So the frequency of it, that is what changes the mood, and that.
Yeah. So if I listen to hard rock or whatever, I don't feel very nice. But if you listen to jazz or something, I get very lightheaded actually. So something like that, I feel very well. So and we have as well energy, and we share it around. And if you're high in your frequency, you can inspire other people. And I read these things, and actually the interesting is, it doesn't matter whether it's writers from India, from Africa, they write actually the same things. And being high in frequency, I just years and years later, I understand that was happened to me one day. Because I was working at Netherlands Forensic Institute, and it was after the Schiedammer Park mord. So it was a very tense period.
What was that about?
And that was a little kid was killed here in a park, and the forensics did a very lousy job. And that was the moment, I think it's 30 years ago, that we have professionalized forensic. Okay, and in this period, the managers were on really big pressure, and everyone had to go to a consultant, to coach. And actually, I didn't want to coach. I know I can handle myself, but I had to go. So I went to Utrecht to coach 8 times, and he was a very nice guy. I had very nice talks with him. And after 8 times, he said to me, Andro, I have to send a report to your boss, but actually, I don't know what I have to say. And honestly, if I have to write a report, I have to write. I stopped with smoking, I stopped with drinking, and I'm now at the fitness club. And that was nice to hear. But years and years later, I understand that I was high in my frequency. I could inspire him. And that was happening actually the writers say, if you do good with a clean heart, not with greed, you do things for society, you can inspire other people. And that's actually what you're seeing, what's happening in the academy. Yeah.
Who has inspired you, though? I mean, we've spoken about the books, but are there people in your life?
My mother, she was very bright. She was a very bright lady. She came with us to the Netherlands. We were very young with my brother and my sister. And she said, day one, we don't speak Suriname anymore here. You have to speak fluent Netherlands with no accent. You stop. And every Sunday, she took us with a bus to all the classical touristic places in the Netherlands. So I know all the classics here. If people talk about Volendam, or they talk about Drielandenpunt, or they talk about I don't know what, I can talk with them. And that was very, very smart from her. Yeah. And at a very high age, she knew my cell phone number. She was in her 90s. She knew about American politics. She knew what I was doing, so she was a real inspiration, yeah.
You said that you made a very good prediction about CNN. That was that example. What is your prediction for over 3 years from now?
Yeah, that's a good, and I know what's going to happen. Actually, I addressed 2 problems in conservation. One was the lack of forensic knowledge, but number 2 is actually border security. People who are working in border security, they are only trained to detect in luggage and containers, in cargo, drugs, weapons and explosives. But they're not trained to detect wildlife and wildlife products. So if you don't train these people, the problem will be still there. And and when I talk to the professors from the Erasmus Medical Center, they say because of climate change, you get a human-wildlife conflict. Humans and animals are coming much closer to each other because when there is drought, people leave the place and animals leave these places as well. So they meet each other where the environment is pleasant, So zoonotic diseases will occur more and more. And if you consume these animals and traffic these animals, you will get a next COVID or whatever. And he said if COVID was as bad as Ebola, we wouldn't exist anymore. So it's a real big threat. So the plan is now to build a new academy, another academy, in the northern part of Africa, South Africa. It has to be a 2,000 square meter facility. Then we do forensics, but we will as well build a facility for training for customs people. So we will have containers, we have vehicles, an airplane, we will have X-ray machines, all that kind of stuff to train these people. And worldwide, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. No facility and no training. So I think that will be our next topic that we're working on. Yeah.
So we will be seeing more of the marketing of Wildlife Forensic Academy, because I'm looking at your shirt and I really love that.
Yeah, we'd have to do more on the marketing. Actually, We are on social media and we are on TikTok, but the strongest thing is when students come, they go back to university and they spread the news to other students. So that's really great. Yeah.
Good to know that you are on TikTok. So on TikTok, you type, what do you type?
Wildlife Forensic Academy.
And on LinkedIn, you type?
Yeah, you can type Wildlife Forensic Academy, or you can type my name, and through my name, you can come to our company.
Facebook?
Yeah, no, Instagram.
Instagram, YouTube?
No.
Well, via this channel, we will know enough about you. Is there any last thing that you would want to say to the viewers?
I think in books there's a lot of knowledge, and you can take it for granted, but I have lived according some of these theories, and they work really. Reaching goals, being successful, what you have to do, getting higher in your frequency. Yeah, if you put some energy there, it will be fruitful.
Thank you so much, Andro Vos, for being here.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.